All right, welcome everybody to our webinar this morning. We're super excited about it. The topic is why UX will make or break your business, and I'm very excited about the panel we have as well as the audience. You submitted some great questions. We have a few themes for today's conversation, and what's actually interesting is I'd love to hear where people are from. We had registrations from all over the world. But in the chat bar on the right, you can just let us know where you're attending from. And we'd love to say good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you. And we'll be recording the session and making it available for replay. So the reason I'm super excited about this is it's a very relevant topic. It's a question that comes up all the time when we're talking with our clients, as well as for each of the panelists as they're doing their work inside of companies. The audience questions that you submitted, we got a whole list of them. Thank you very much for your participation. And the topics were on what's the biggest UX challenge you're wrestling with, and what's the most pressing question about UX. And the themes that we took away that we're going to talk about here are on how to measure the value of UX, how to get alignment with leadership on the strategic importance of UX, how to get buy-in, how UX needs to plug into the business and be involved in defining business objectives and strategies. And for the audience regarding the panelists is these three folks have a breadth of experience across startups and enterprise companies, working on innovation inside of enterprise as well as with startups, and then also B2C, B2B, and enterprise tool experience. So we may not cover your specific question. Feel free to add more questions in line on the bottom there. You can ask a question. And if we don't touch on it, we'll do a follow-up with you and make sure that we get your question answered, or at least get you some resources that'll be helpful to you. So with that, I want to go ahead and do some quick introductions. We have Leigh Allen-Aredondo with us. She's the head of UX for Spruce Up and the host of the UX Cake podcast. Leigh, what are you working on nowadays? Tell us a little bit about Spruce Up and what's keeping you busy. Can you hear me? Well, let's see if she can hear me. All right, well, let's do this. While Leigh's sitting there, maybe having to reconnect, how about we do Phil real quick? We'll do an introduction of Phil Terrill. So Phil's a business program manager at Microsoft, inside sales and the sales innovation team. And same question, Phil, what are you working on nowadays? Tell the folks a little bit about what you're doing and what's keeping you busy.
Sure. And just to make sure, Craig, you can hear me all right. So, yeah, so part of what, and first, actually, thank you for having myself and the Microsoft team, share our story, right? We've done a lot of work over the last couple of years with UpTop as far as what we're doing regarding UX design for our inside sales group, which is now actually bleeding into the rest of the Microsoft organization, which is interesting, right? So a lot of what I'm doing today is we're actually going through our third revision of the design from a user experience and an interface point of view. So I'm busy actually getting ready to roll that out actually within the next month or so, which is taking up a lot of my time. The other thing that we're doing is across all roles, right? So Microsoft just finished our fiscal year. So with that, there comes a lot of change. And as you can imagine, turning the Microsoft ship sometimes requires a little bit of understanding of what the business will do. So we just came back from Vegas to get an understanding of that in terms of recentering. And so moving into the next couple of months, we'll be redesigning or recreating or creating net new content and experiences for our sellers and the new ones that we'll have in the org. So that's what's taking up a lot of my time today.
Awesome. Thanks for the introduction on that and the overview. And then we have Haden Kirkpatrick with us as well. Haden's the head of marketing strategy and innovation at Esurance, as well as an advisor to startups. So Haden, why don't you tell us a little bit about what's keeping you busy nowadays as well?
Hey, Leigh. Thanks, Craig. I'm very excited to be here. So my role at Esurance includes all market intelligence, primary, secondary, consumer, competitive, and category intelligence, and then I'm responsible for converting those into plans to achieve our market position. We've just recently gone through a repositioning exercise at Esurance, And now our team is converting our efforts into how we develop experience, product, organizational, and operational capabilities to live into our brand position. So customer experience strategy is a key component of that. That falls under my team as well. And we're currently trying to decide how we develop a next-gen leapfrogging experience for consumers to purchase, own, and then ultimately use insurance. So a lot of the things we'll be talking about today have a direct impact on our ability to fulfill our brand position to customers. And I'm excited to come and talk with you all to share our insights and talk about the future of customer experience as it pertains to business.
Awesome. Thanks, Haden. So Leigh, you're back. I want to do a quick introduction of Leigh. Leigh Allen-Aredondo is the head of UX for Spruce Up and host of the UX Cake podcast. And whoops, looks like you might have dropped again, but if not, we're going to do a quick introduction. And if so, we're going to have to move forward. Leigh, are you there?
Lee's having internet issues, I think.
I know. Technology is such a challenge. All right. Well, when Leigh gets back on, we're going to ask her. She has a lot of insights regarding value and how to strategically position UX within organizations. So, but why don't we move forward and we'll start talking, the three of us, on the first theme. And so again, the themes from the questions that we gathered from folks, the first one that had the most questions around it were, how do you measure the value of UX? And I think it's a lot different for if you have a brand new concept that you're trying to get leadership to buy in on versus if you're trying to measure or baseline and improve something that's already existing, right? So I'd love to hear, Haden, why don't you maybe chat a little bit about what you're doing to measure the value of UX, how you guys do it, and then I would love to have Phil provide his insights as well, because his platform is a whole different type of experience focused on internal users.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great question. So the value of user experience is highly variable based on your business model. So really savvy customer experience strategists are are as good business people as they are customer experience strategists, and they're skilled at marrying the two together. For an insurance business, complicated financial instrument that has a fairly long and lengthy purchase process, a fairly complicated purchase process, and then you're dealing with another customer experience that is a highly stressful moment of truth, as we say in the customer experience category, where you've got to fulfill a claim. And each of those two experiences play tension with your brand and the customer experience that you try and create. So at purchase, we want to get customers to see a price very quickly. Insurance is the only business that I know of where you don't actually know how much your product costs when you sell it, because we don't know how likely Craig is to have a claim. We know what kind of car he drives, but we don't know, and we know kind of how he drives, but we're not sure, compared to Craig's behavior and the rest of the actuarial pool, whether we're going to spend 65 cents of every dollar, 68 cents of every dollar, 70 cents of every dollar paying Craig's money out in claims. So what you try and do is get somebody to the point where they see your price, and you make that a compelling price offer at the outset. So that implies a lot of technology-enabled, what we call discovery, or the augmentation of data from public data sets. We can take a very limited set of information. Let's back up. Customers don't like shopping for insurance. I don't know if you're familiar with this. Pretty much everybody hates shopping for insurance. So most customers want to get to the point where they see a price pretty quickly, and they want as little cognitive load in getting to that price as humanly possible. So we look at ways we can augment our current data set with publicly available data sets, even if it comes at a cost. We look at advanced technology solutions like scanning driver's license or doing automotive pre-fill to help streamline that and get somebody to an actual number very quickly. And then the customer experience really focuses on helping customers understand what they're buying, tune it up, and customize it to them. Most customers don't know what bodily injury coverage is, or what MedPay is, or what gap insurance is. These are very complicated terms, but they're really important terms for consumers to understand so they're financially protected. We spend a lot of our calories helping educate consumers through the process so we can speed them from the point where they get a quote to leaving with a policy in which they're confident and they know that they're protected. So our priorities generally include speed to quote. Then obviously you have a price elasticity and a conversion or a purchase intention metric, as well as full site yield. Those are the things we look at various stages in the process to understand where our customer experience is delivering and not within our purchase experience.
So you already know the personas that you're targeting. You kind of have a hypothesis around what their challenge is for making the purchase, and you're testing that constantly, I'm assuming.
Yes, we have a segmentation scheme that my team developed that is behavioral and attitudinal. So there's an actuarial scheme. There's a bunch of product managers who worry about getting Craig the exact right price. My team doesn't get involved in that because it's a specific science in insurance. But we do have behavioral and attitudinal segment schemes that range from your quick quote, I want the lowest price possible, just get me in and get me out the door and get me legal, all the way to the I'm a super interested buyer. I shop 20 carriers. I do my own spreadsheets to compare coverages and prices. And there's a variety of customers in between. As a customer walks into our experience, we gather data with them on them for both actuarial fit as well as experiential fit. And we try and map customers through adaptive customer experiences that respond to their likelihood to purchase and the kind of information that they need to make that purchase and feel confident in that purchase. So we do have sort of a multi-variant flow that we deliver to our customers that's a combination of both their financial well-being and from an actuarial perspective, as well as the way.
Awesome. So that's a B2C primarily experience, is that correct?
Exclusively. We don't have any B2B. We're a B2C company purely.
Awesome. And then Phil, on the flip side of this, so you guys are creating a disruptive sales enablement portal to help with onboarding, training, et cetera. And so your audience is more narrow, right? It's specific to internal employees.
Correct.
Yeah. And so how do you guys measure the value of user experience? What are some of the things that you're doing that may be different than Haden, but also may be similar?
Yeah. So we're targeting, our internal user, which is, a seller, right? At the end of the day, we're a sales organization. And so we start with that as the destination, right? Is what is the user experience going to be for a seller? Whether it is in the stage of onboarding, if they are an experienced seller, what kind of content do they need, or what type of experience do we want to drive with them? Or it might be the case it's a sales leader or somebody, even higher up in our organization that's trying to understand the value again, right, of this user experience at a holistic view. So we're constantly moving in different directions and quantifying and qualitatively, evaluating how the impact of the user experience within our tool called the DISH, or the Digital Inside Sales Hub, what that return is for our organization. So there's some of, yes, we know the profile, and then we're also pivoting towards, with the sellers on a constant basis, what is this experience going to be for you? What sort of features or functionality do we want to land with you, or do you want us to build for you in terms of a capability set? And then at the end of the day, how does this content really help you as a seller retire quota or make money, right? Because we're in the sales org, so our pivot is always going to be towards making sure we're aligned to that end goal of the seller as we build out different types of content and user experiences within the DISH. So.
Okay. So then do you use quantitative and qualitative methods to try to justify or validate what you're doing?
Yes, we use both, right? So on the quantitative side, like we have traditional web analytics from, click through to, point in time clicks or whatever it might be in terms of the customer or the user's journey within the DISH. Qualitatively, right, we built out what we call like the DISH champ community, which is this, what I would always call this insider group of sellers that give us the nitty gritty or the real deal around the content that we're delivering and that they're consuming, every day. So we get a lot of direct qualitative feedback on the experience, whether it's doing the UAT testing right next to a seller or sitting on a conference call with a group of 30 sellers and they're just picking apart, our latest design that we've landed or experience that we've landed. And then we go back and iterate against that, right? The other part that we're doing is aligning content which is, I think at this point, logical, right, is aligning content to another tool that we use internally that spits out intelligent recommendations based on, artificial intelligence and machine learning. So then at that point in time, what we're doing is saying, you have this intelligent recommendation, and now we're going to give you this recommended content to match that recommendation. So as you pursue something that could retire quota, you also are armed with the right content for that deal at your fingertips. So we're starting to dive deeper into that space regarding, content driven by machine learning and artificial intelligence.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. And then, so you guys are using technologies like artificial intelligence, machine learning. My assumption, Haden, is you're doing that as well as appending data from various sources. Is that correct?
Correct. So there are several ways in which we use data. One is discovery of information that we can use to augment the customer experience and move users, shoppers mostly, further down the insurance quote experience. Let me give you a good example. Nobody knows where to find their VIN number on their car. It's like a 32-digit code that is specific to, it's alphanumeric, it's a pain in the butt to find. If you do know where it is, it's really hard to see. You got to go out, shopping for insurance online would mean you have to go out to your car and get it. Now what we have on the other hand is a database that's managed by the DMV in each state that contains your licensing records, that contains your tile records, 50 cents or whatever per ping, to take Craig's name and Craig's address, match it up against their data set, and then pull in things like your vehicle make, model, VIN, any driving history that you may have, the risk factors associated with some of your domicile items. So we try and acquire, there's a business case for streamlining the purchase process. Each incremental page you make a customer go through and each incremental field you make a customer enter is one point of friction that can prevent you from converting a sale. This is why Amazon has one-click purchase, even though adding it to the cart and going to the cart and then hitting purchase now is only 3 clicks. They still have the one-click purchase for a reason. And in a complicated financial services experience like ours, each of those pages shows significant drop-off in your ability to deliver yield. So on some level, even across the customers we don't convert, it makes economic sense to pay for the data to move customers further down the funnel, because what you get in terms of customer lifetime value more than pays back the breakage you have on discovering that data from public data sets. So as we talk about user experience versus the business and the challenges we all face in bridging that gap, it's important to understand, the marginal price that you get for each page load, the marginal drop-off you get in efficiency for each page load, how your customers actually walk through a purchase experience, where those breaks are, where those points of friction are, and understand what your lost economic opportunity is through the funnel. Once you've got that baseline, you can start to make business cases for patching holes in your experience, for developing new data sets that augment your experience, to allow a machine learning algorithm to run through your experience is something that has massive business potential. But you can't bridge the gap between that technology solution and the ability to command resources and make a business case from your organization unless you can quantify the marginal costs for those various different experiences. So we spend most of our analytics time running through that, trying to figure out, if I remove 6 questions from one page and cut that page in half, do I see a material uplift in our yield? These are things that our data science team tortures over all the time, and my team's responsible for business casing and figuring out.
Awesome. That actually kind of segues right into this next topic is how do you guys get alignment with leadership on the strategic importance of UX, the investment in it, obviously using data, right? A baseline, using use cases and scenarios, business cases, et cetera, are ways to do that. Phil, why don't you chat a little bit about kind of the evolution of you guys had a challenge or an initiative to build this thing, and then now you're in the 3rd iteration of it, and how do you keep the users, the sellers engaged, as well as making sure that you're aligning with what the business really wants?
Yeah, so and it's a good good call out in terms of making sure leadership is aligned, because at least from our point of view, there's actually been a lot of investment right into this holistic experience for the sellers. Starting back, I mean, Craig, you know this, like a couple years ago, this was a challenge to the team of, can you guys build out a digital workbench, right, essentially for a seller to go consume content. And as people probably listening could imagine, like Microsoft in its 40 plus years has created content that exists all over the place, in any which format, from years and years across a lot of different products. And sellers, essentially, if we could provide them an opportunity to reduce the time that it takes to search for content, reduce the time it takes to onboard a seller, things like that, there's a different value. A good example around onboarding is 2 years ago when we released Dish, it took about 6 weeks for a seller to go through onboarding, and now it takes 2 weeks, right? So we've taken a lot of the learnings from, yes, sellers directly, but also work with like our process improvement teams and other teams within the org to really understand the end-to-end experience, right? To find some of that value to return to like a leadership, person. The other part, which is just realistic, is our team is doing so much in just talking to sellers, is that the experience is truly driven by the seller, which I think within our team in Microsoft is a unique approach to take versus it being reverse corporate mandated, right? We typically go against that notion of that corporate will create something and then roll it out. And in our case, we are creating the framework and want the sellers to fill in the boxes, right?
Mm-hmm.
With the content that makes the most sense, which then will return the value back to us and saying, if you built it as a seller, you'll consume it, right? And so to that point, we rolled out Dish about 2 years ago, again, like a year ago, actually, the usage or consumption was around 30%, right? So 12 months later, let's fast forward, it's around 75, 76%, and that's of an organization for our team that's about 1,800 sellers, right? So that's a huge shift, but a lot of that plays to the content, the experience. And so you take that number to leadership, they're like, oh, okay, there's value in the content, and there's only value because the sellers are engaged and they're a part of the process. So that's sort of the value that we've seen with the user experience, especially with the leadership perspective, is if the sellers are building it and are part of that, they're likely to consume, right? And then the rest will follow.
Right. And then my assumption is the end result is you're showing that sellers are becoming more effective in a shorter period of time and then having more success in their sales numbers, is my assumption, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then the other part that goes with that, right, in terms of seller effectiveness is, and while I would love to give you the full stat line, there's some, Microsoft restrictions on the full under the hood data, but realistically, like the other part that we're influencing is other tool sets that are being delivered to sellers, right? Especially from a user experience standpoint. Yeah. So our team sort of pivoted from being a new team within the organization to a team of experts around how to drive a user experience for a seller profile that ranges in terms of experience, and how they consume content. And a lot of our group is millennials, right? So, I speak for that perspective is, hey, this is how they consume content, whether it's sitting in front of a desk or on their surface, some remote place in a coffee shop. That experience is what we're dealing with. And so leadership wants us to create content in an experience that matches how they consume. So
Got it. So contextual, relevant, where they are. So, hey, Haden, so I know about 70% of your time you spend on tuning the experience that's out there and working on getting more out of it. And then I think you said about 30% of your time you're doing innovation. So as you're looking at conveying to leadership from the work that you're doing to tune versus the work that you're doing to innovate, do you have a different way of communicating with them or a different message that you communicate with them about the strategic value of that investment?
Yes. Great question. Wow. So we try and break down 70% business as usual, 20% first horizon innovations, and then 10% second horizon innovations, which is, close enough to see, but too far away to touch. And each different phase comes with a different level of intensity and a different level of data that you have to pull together to make a case. So if you're in that 70% that's business as usual, you're speaking about fall offs in the customer experience, lost sales, things that may drive cost of acquisition. In insurance, it's a bit of a we account for advertising in our cost of acquisition. We account for a lot of things that roll into the amount of money we spend to acquire a customer. And each time you drop somebody in the funnel, it's an economic inefficiency that feeds your way through the rest of the system in terms of lost sales, but also feeds the bottom line book and unit efficiencies of your business. And there's a way you can create and craft a story for either that commands resources and times for the business as usual. Once you start looking out into first horizon innovations, it gets to be a little bit stickier. And it depends on your motivations as an overall business and as your executive team thinks about the business. Esurance, for example, is a low-cost operator. That means that every dollar we spend doing something is a dollar we're taking from customers, and we try and drive cost efficiencies into our business so we can hand those dollars back to customers. So when I look at the challenges in the business, I try and speak in great, big, massive terms to help set a level set on the scope of the issue that we're dealing with, and then work back into the business case to solve for those first horizon opportunities. Let me give you an example. 55% of the calls to our claim center are, "Where's my claim?" That is a status check. That is claims are a phased gated process. You've got a notice of loss, an appraisal, an assessment. There is maybe a 5 or 6 step process. And having half of our phone calls in our car centers be about a status update is a multi-million-dollar business opportunity. By comparison, I look at FedEx or UPS, and they've got statusing mastered. They send you a text message. The text message has a link. You click the link, and it says, "Here's where you are in your little bar." And if there's an exception, there's a red X, and there's notes saying here, date notes with the most recent first. Here's what's going on with the exception. Something like that for an insurance company is hugely valuable. And to gather the executives and wrap their mind around that business opportunity, all I have to do is say, "There's $25 million a year on the floor." Very quickly you start having ears perk up around a need to solve that. After that, it's just the iterative process of going and building it.
Got it.
For the last 10%, the real game-changing things like what can machine learning do for underwriting and fraud protection, some of these things are just so unquantifiable that they defy belief almost. And in those instances, I try and find some industry innovators or some solution companies or some insurtech or fintech startups that are entering that space. I look at a lot of funding rounds from major VCs. If I can put a finger on a company like, say, Lemonade, that is doing mostly AI-driven back office management. They raised $180 million in 2 years. And the last round was a $120 million round from SoftBank's venture fund. I hold that up and say, these guys are working it, and smart money is paying attention to what they're doing. And so we should seriously consider that as part of our second horizon innovation approach. In any second horizon innovation, particularly as it pertains to customer experience, you're kind of guessing, you're faking it until you make it. You've got to sort of size the opportunity, look for areas where the ecosystem overall is investing in those opportunities, prototype what that might look like, test it with your users to see if it's in demand. You have to tread more carefully because you can't future cast all potential opportunities for your business. But I find it helpful to command the interest of executives by pointing to other competitors who are coming for us down market as potential competitive threats, show the money that they're raising, show that that is a proxy for smart money believing that there's a business there, and use that as a wedge to try and get the company to move forward. Yeah.
So you're identifying what's important to the exec team and the board. You're doing your research and your homework, and then you're able to convey that message in the language that they understand with the triggers that they have, and you're proving it out with prototyping, doing some agile design work or some design thinking along the way, and then testing it with some end users to just prove out your hypothesis, right?
Exactly. And the approach that you might take varies wildly depending on whether it's the shark closest to your body the next thing after that, or the next thing after that. But the
Okay.
methodology and the discipline doesn't change.
Yeah.
And the way that you address sort of iterating it, improving the use case, and testing into it is more or less the same. But
Yep.
to command the resources from your executive team, I think the data that you would use and pull together to justify that business case varies wildly depending upon where it is in the innovation curve.
Got it. Makes sense. So, you know, there's some people on the call I know that had submitted some questions around, you know, how do I prove out value? I think you guys gave some really great examples. I want to just throw out a couple other things. You know, oftentimes using industry examples, industry stats, et cetera, will help you as you're trying to convey a message. So some great sources are the Design Value Index. If somebody doesn't understand the value of design, the DMI, Design Management Institute, put together an index where they compared 16 companies that were design-centric against the S&P 500, and over a 10-year period, they watched the performance of their stock. And from 2005 to 2015, the DMI outperformed the S&P by 211%. So, you know, using stats like that, I think, are helpful. We'll put up a link for the DMI website, as well as the Design and Tech report is a great source of information and stats that you can use. You know, one of the great ones from the 2016 report was design isn't just about beauty, it's about relevance and meaningful results. And so as you're talking to your leaders, it's really conveying the meaningful result, which a lot of times is top line, bottom line, it's engagement, it's getting more customers, it's getting consumption, whatever those metrics are that are important to them. I think Phil and Haden did a great job of speaking to that. And so those are some tips in terms of how to start conveying value up the chain. Now, in terms of getting buy-in, you guys both kind of spoke about that. And I think for some of the folks on the call, one of the common questions was, how do I get more resources allocated to this endeavor, right? And so I guess the question would be not just how do I get more resources, is do I use inside folks, do I use outside folks, or whatever, right? Those are part of the buying decision. Do you guys have some tips in terms of or some thoughts around how to make that type of decision? How do I get this? How do I get some resources allocated to this that you can share with the audience?
Sure. So I have a different perspective on this than some, because I grew up in an environment at T-Mobile in Seattle, right, where Craig and I met. There was a little different in terms of the business methodologies as it pertained to capturing resources. So let's say that I discover that 55% of people that call our claim centers are calling for where's my claim, and it's fairly quick and easy for me to say, you know, how many of those are we fielding any given year versus what's the average time to resolve, the hourly rate, and you sort of build a cost model up from that. And then I just sort of stick a thumb in the air and say, I bet I can defer or digitally automate 25 to 33%. So I'm hedging. Honestly, I think if we started sending proactive text messages with an embedded link that says, here's your status, it would probably defer 75%. But I hedge against that and I say, well, I'm going to defer 30. That takes the $30 million opportunity down to $10 million. At that point, it's a no-brainer for me to say, I need 100K to go and build an experience, test it, put some customers into usability lab, try and quantify that, get some SMEs to look at it, and get a base of customers that see that and respond to it, and then give us a rough NPS or satisfaction measure. That's how you get to the testing phase and development phase. Coming out of that, if I can show our current experience and the customer feedback qualitatively against that, which we've got reams of data on, and then I can show the one that I tested, and this one is this one is directionally better than this one in a meaningful fashion, I can go back and command more resources from the business to develop the thing and test it into a few states. So now I've gone from $30 million opportunity. I'm committing to the business that I will defer 10 of that. I need $100,000 to prove it out. That's been proven. That's $100,000 out of 10 million is 1%. So I'm asking for a loan from the company of 1% of the value I intend to return. If your executives can't wrap their head around that, you're in the wrong company. So it's like they're just brutally honest with you, right? And it depends upon if you're at Facebook, you've got a bunch of crack designers who are all falling over themselves to work there. Esurance is a really super innovative and next generation insurer, but it's not like we're Facebook or Google. So we have to use very tight cost models to make a case. Then we have to use a disciplined business casing approach and a phased gated approach to solving for that. Now, I might find out after I size and prototype a solution that, I just don't have the design talent necessary to do something huge and game-changing like reinvent the entire customer experience for a digitized world. If I've got 3 designers that are constantly optimizing the quote flow and the claims experience and other things, and we only have the resources to do the 70% that's business as usual, I probably have to augment that with more strategic research from a more well-regarded and more talented design firm like UpTop, like some other design firms that you find in SF or around the world, that'll help take a step back, understand the customer's needs, create a strategic framework that you can then go and incept, and then your team can come in and sort of take that as the strategic guidance and tune as they go along.
Makes sense.
So we've seen a lot of success taking the daily business as usual stuff and having our team members do that. But to find the great designers in the world and to hire them into your organization and to have them spend their days, it's almost always cheaper for strategic user experience design to go to a specialized house that spends most of their time thinking about design, as opposed to bring in specialized designers with that kind of thinking.
Yeah, it makes sense. Thanks for that. Phil, you want to add something to that?
I think, just the last piece is sort of where Microsoft, at least within inside sales, pivoted, right? We went the route of getting somebody who was extremely specialized and really, really knowledgeable about the type of experience we wanted to create for our sellers, versus a lot of people are like, well, you're Microsoft. You should have just got your own designers from inside somewhere. And while that sounds great, if you think about the process it would take, like, for example, the fluidity and the agility that our team moves, we wouldn't have, right? We'd be slower and become extremely reactionary to our seller type. And so we chose to have a team that could be agile with us versus go our corporate route, which wouldn't benefit our team's, end result or desired end state. And so we went with UpTop, of course. Like, that's the relationship for context, right?
Yeah, it makes sense.
And so that's what we've done, and it's proven valuable, especially if you think about some of the metrics percentages I've outlined already for what we do. So
great. And we had a question that came.
I think it's a good rule of thumb. If your product is a digital technology platform or massive ecosystem, specifically with a branded consumer front end, then it probably makes sense for you to have your own team of really crack designers. Ours is a financial contract. Our product is a financial contract. We are a financial services insurance company with a technology operating structure and belief and strategy. Facebook is a technology company with a sort of skinny user front end that ties into their huge and ever-growing platform. So I just don't believe that outside of pure high-tech, user experience as a design is probably going to be something that's going to be user experience and design strategy is going to be cost-effective to insource, because those are scarce resources. Most user designers are very creative. They want to work on multiple types of products. I mean, user designers are going to get bored with insurance after a year and a half or two. That's going to be what's going to happen. So, it's one of those things where it depends on your business model and the fit that design as a strategic resource has to fit into your business model. And I think most business models, it's probably better to outsource it and find a specialized group from a third party that can come in and deliver value in real quick sprints, and that have continuously working on other projects outside of your category that keeps their design thinking sharp, keeps their customer understanding sharp. There's just a lot of stuff you get from working with a company portfolio clients outside your industry and in other industries that you can leverage to better understand how you can improve your business.
That's great. So we had a couple questions that came in on the sidebar here. So Danielle asked, what you're saying to Haden is what you're saying is about going off and testing it in a lab. why would you test in a lab versus doing contextual inquiry, seeing the person using it in their own environment, or maybe you guys do both. And then wouldn't you rather do discovery research in a more real life scenario that would be related to contextual inquiry or things like an ethnographic study and things like that?
Yeah, great question. So when I say put them in a lab, I'm just like anything where you're setting it up in a controlled environment. So contextual inquiries could be fine. It could be, something you're streaming from their laptop at home. And the important thing is getting an experience that looks reasonably realistic and then putting it in front of customers with some lightweight qual and quant that you can use to compare to your current experience. Now, in regards to the testing scenario, insurance is a bit of a different category than most. It's highly regulated. A lot of the things that you want to do in terms of, depending on the state that you launch in, the questions that you can ask change.
Yep.
So it's don't take my feedback in terms of our process to be universally applicable to your business. We work in a highly regulated, very tight insurance category that varies for every 50 state we deal with. It's like 50 different countries just to do business in the United States. So we have to be a lot more disciplined and a lot more certain about what we're going to do before we put it into market, because half the time we have to file it with a local regulator to get approval on it before we actually launch it, and that bears with additional costs. So we put in market test as the very last gate in things that we do, mostly because the regulatory frame requires it, and the risk to the business is so great that you got to know for sure or pretty much for sure before you go out. And we therefore test more rigorously up funnel. If you're in an e-commerce company that is a proper digital back end and you can replace pages and switch things out very quickly, go for it. We do a lot of that in our rate treatment pages. We A, B, C, D, Z, F, L, P, test every kind of rate page treatment we want. But up funnel, whether it's a one-click scan a driver's license thing, has to be filed with a regulator to ensure that it's in compliance. Whether we use education or credit or these other things have to be checked with the regulator before we price it out. So any changes to those or any augmentations of those generally have to be run through the regulatory body before we can approve it, and that usually slows down our path to market in a real life test environment.
Got it. And Phil, from your perspective, I know you guys go out and visit the sellers at the sales centers, and you kind of watch what they're doing in some ways, right? To get feedback.
We do some of the like in market, and for us would be inside of a sales center. So there's 8 of them around the world, and so we actually go sit with sellers, watch their click path, their click journey, get that sort of qualitative feedback right then when we're sitting next to a seller or a group of sellers. So for us, like in-person testing is a lot better for us than sitting here in Redmond or wherever thinking that the things that we have built are gold. And so we leverage the sellers at all points in time of the content journey, getting to, production.
That's great.
With the sellers.
Great. And then thanks for answering that. And Casey asked a question: how often do you recommend revisiting big UX improvements? Or do you guys do them incrementally, or how do you? I'm assuming it's partially the culture of your company and things like that. But tell us a little bit about that.
I mean, I can speak for the Microsoft perspective. Like for what we've done is, so this is our third massive, what I would call overhaul of our platform, really in about 18 months from my time being on the team, really. And so I think the massive things that are going to really shift the experience for us, given that our team is moving so fast, our organization and the technology is changing so much. Like for us, it sometimes requires that we do it every 6 months. But I think it depends, right? 6 months is maybe a lot for you, but it might not be for us. It also depends on the resourcing you have behind it. Like we have a dedicated team that's all they do is make sure that this content, is relevant, and realistic for our seller community. And so for us, it's rather frequent. And sometimes we make tweaks to roles, right? So certain personas get upgraded, a user experience, while others are still we're testing out other ones intentionally to see like how this community reacts to content. And then we start to make slow incremental changes over time to bring everybody's experience to a consistent level. But a lot of it is intentional testing. But it just kind of depends on the resourcing and timelines you have for your organization. But from our team, we've seen real benefit in doing it, within the shorter, time periods.
That's great.
But it might be different for like Haden and Esurance.
Yeah, Haden, you have some thoughts on that? How often do you guys revisit big UX improvements, or do you have a recommendation on that? Might be different, obviously, like you said, if it's an e-commerce site versus something that's highly regulated versus a internal enterprise tool. What are your thoughts?
Depends on what you mean when you say big.
Yeah,
I would say our original quote flow hasn't changed much in the last 10 years. So at some point, when we see major game change, the quote flow is now changing materially over the course of the next 2 to 3 years, but it's a slow moving thing. Insurance is a slow moving category. And a lot of it just, if we see somebody do something really great, we look at that and determine, here's what we've got, here's what this new company has or what our competitors have, and wow, how gapped are we? And that's a good way to ensure that we continually are being kept sharp by the market. We are fortunate enough to be based in San Francisco. There is a new insurance tech company spooling up every bloody month here, and just getting money thrown at them like, VCs around here sneeze money at insure tech companies. Yeah, like nobody. So it's very, very, there's a company like Hippo that just literally their entire value proposition is changing the homeowner's quote flow. That's it. Yeah. And it's very easy for us to say, oh, okay, these guys just got raised money to go into 2 states with this product. Let's look at that. Let's see how it interacts. We're all digital consumers, so we can consume it just like everybody else. And if we think we've got, a very specific wedge where we're getting beaten there, the benefit of being at a company the size of Esurance, insurance has broad moats, which means if we see somebody in San Francisco doing something cool, that's elegant, that's slick, that customers love, for them to expand that out and go countrywide, it takes 3 years. Even if they were well capitalized, they got to spool up licensing in each state. They got to get approved. Like it's a long, long row to walk. And it's an even longer one to get the capital backing to support it, to be able to actually manage the money. I mean, it's hard. And Esurance is much faster and bigger than those guys. So we look down market to the startup to see where game-changing innovations come. And then we, frankly, let's just say, aggressively borrow the things that we see that are the best to compete up market. So we are in a unique situation. That said, we're always constantly revisiting the designs that we've developed in the 70% that's business as usual.
Yep.
And if we see somebody that really rocks our world on the other 30%, we take that, put it into our queue, test it and evaluate, and go through the entire flywheel process that we just described.
Cool. All right. I'm going to change gears just a little bit because I think we covered a lot of the themes. Just as we're kind of getting toward the end of our time, what's hot technology, things that you're keeping an eye on, whether it's in your space or personally, things that are interesting. Love to hear a little bit of that from you guys' point of view. So whoever wants to kick off.
I mean, I can go, because if you want to go ahead, it looks like you're about to go. So
no,
go ahead, Phil.
I mean, I'm really intrigued by artificial intelligence and specifically augmented intelligence. For financial services, it's a real, nobody understands how financial services works. It's kind of an American thing, right? We don't teach finance or anything to anybody. So there's a lot of design work being invested in how you help people, how you take data, present it to customers in a way that makes it understandable, helps them have confidence that they're buying the right things. I'm really interested in some of those trends from a technology perspective. I'm also really intrigued by blockchain.
Cool.
The buzzword thing around every category. But for financial services, particularly insurance, it has massive potential. Smart contracts are very interesting to us. I mean, we envision a world where when you crash your Tesla, we receive a signal that says, he has towing and labor, issue a tow truck. He has rental car coverage, send him out a Tesla to drive. He has rideshare coverage, send an Uber to pick him up and take him to the dealership. The Tesla knows all of the damages that's been done to it because it's wired up with computers at every square inch of that thing. So we can tell, it's a total loss, what it is. You can immediately issue payments, and this can all happen on a blockchain almost instantaneously. Don't really know what that's going to do yet to the insurance category. Technologically speaking, this is a long way away, but it's something that we're researching and studying actively because we think it'll be the future of the category, specifically as it pertains to digital.
Cool. You just kind of blew my mind.
Yeah.
It's nice to have practical use cases for blockchain. They're few and far between.
Yeah, that's cool. Phil, what about you? What's kind of hot on your radar?
I think it's going to be probably a little bit interesting to get my response because a lot of it will be similar to Haden, right? In terms of AI, like we're in that space, obviously, like we compete in that environment all day, every day as a company. And just looking at how we're using it even now within our platform and some other associated teams. So AI is huge. The other thing that we're starting to look at least I'm focusing on, is like around like it's aligned to AI, but it's around like the whole cognitive services model and framework that we have, especially when you think about the seller journey. So there's that, which is we're working on it now around like speech to text and all these kind of things, the experience around a meeting, how content might be consumed, how artificial intelligence moves the content or the experience that a seller has based on where they're at in their tenure, so to speak. Whatever, there's a lot of different scenarios around AI, cognitive services. We're doing a lot with bots, which still goes back to AI. Bots for us, we have one. The impact it's had in the org is tremendous, to the point that like Satya is all excited about this one bot that was built by 3 sellers in our Dublin sales center. So it's like the bot growth or whatever, evolution, whatever you want to call it. I don't know. We have bots on top of bots here. So I'm just trying to figure out like where one bot could fit in. And so we have one bot, which is,
it's hard to tell where one bot ends and another bot begins.
I don't know. You don't understand. And if I had one offline, I'm going to show you all the bots we have. But there's like 30 I've seen recently. But anyway, between AI, cognitive services, like the machine learning part, just from a Microsoft point of view, like, I'm interested around like ubiquitous computing, like what that really is going to mean.
Yeah.
So, I don't want to go down that hole for people, but there's awesome. There's a lot.
And to the audience, apologize that Leigh had some technical issues and she dropped off, but for sure we want to get her back involved in the webinar, as well as she had some great insights around strategic research, strategic UX approaches, some practical things that I think will be great takeaways from this. So Rochelle and I will grab some time with her that we can try to put that back into this audience as some additional resources. So last couple questions for you guys. Let's see here. In terms of UX in general, because there's customer experience, CX, and then there's UX. There's a confusion oftentimes with UI and UX, right? Like, is it the screen or is it the experience? What's the most unexpected thing that you guys have learned in creating the user experience and the customer experience, whether it's at your current company or a previous? Was there any aha moment that you had that said, hey, we need to do more of this or we need to do less of this? Kind of like a satisfaction question for you in your daily life as you're doing your job, kind of what stirs your cocoa related to the users using your stuff?
Oh, wow. So one of the constant surprises that I am always surprised by in insurance is that customers don't, the level of automation is generally well received in most every category I've ever worked in, right? Just handling something for a customer and telling them it's handled is, I think, one of the pinnacles of customer experience strategy overall. Not in insurance. It is not a automate my claim environment, right? Customers want to know what's
Everything.
going on. Yeah. Well, so, I mean, you would think yes, but it's like the Goldilocks zone of customer experience design, where they want to know, they don't want it done for them. They want to be high touch kind of along the way, and constantly follow up with you. So it's this ever shifting line between what you semi-automate, what you augment for the user so they can see and understand where they are in the process, and then what you do to bring them along in that process while providing them the right level of information so they don't call your center and have you absorb cost. And I'm constantly surprised at how that changes. We might test one thing 3 years ago and customers don't want it, and then they find it on Amazon, or they get used to using it on Facebook, or one of the big tech companies rolls out a similar solution, and all of a sudden now customers are expecting that as the design standard going forward. So the one thing that I am most surprised by how inconsistent it is. And that's sort of the challenge for user designing overall. I mean, you never know what customers are going to want. You just sort of do your best to deliver.
That's why we got to talk to them.
That's right. You got to talk to them all the time.
Phil, we've got about a minute. How about you?
For me, I think especially like within Microsoft so far, I look at our end user all the time, our profile. I mean, I talk to them often, but I think we get so caught up in over-engineering stuff here. A lot of the times, and I think it's just because our broad set of solutions, and then there's enterprise, and then there's the consumer side, and then sometimes we don't know which one's which. And so, for one thing I've realized, and I think is the biggest thing for our team, has been like simplifying, like just simplicity. Especially when it comes to like a lot of what we're doing around enabling a seller to go to market at the end of the day is what we're focused on. And so like the more we've been able to simplify the content, simplify the ability to get to what a seller really wants to get to, has really helped us drive the numbers in terms of what we want, which is consumption, but also help them retire quota, which is the only reason why they care to be at Microsoft as a seller. And so I think that's the biggest thing is simplicity. And the other part that I've started to notice is important for us is a lot of what we're creating in terms of functionality or experiences actually mirrors the consumer environment. Like a lot of our sellers use Instagram, so that's video. So we are focused on how does video, which it does, and we have it in the data, right, that says video plays a huge role in what we do. So why aren't we including video into more of our designs versus giving people a whole bunch of stuff to read? They're not going to read it. They're going to watch a video, or they want to share content that way. So just little things that are obvious that from a design point of view or an experience point of view, we're tired of mirroring the consumer environment. So what we do for our end users and internally here at Microsoft. So
that's great. All right, so we're going to wrap up in last minute or so here. You can do a little self-talk. Haden, are you speaking at anything coming up? Where can people find you?
Great question. I'll be presenting at the Big Data and Artificial Intelligence Summit down in Santa Clara at the end of August, and then I'll be presenting at the Summit, which is the rebranding of the Open Mobile Summit in late November.
Cool. Okay.
I think both of those are on my LinkedIn page, so feel free to reach out.
Okay. Phil, anything? I know you had a book. You've spoken at a couple things.
Yeah, I have. So I've been a part of co-authoring a book called Sales Success Stories Volume 1. So that comes out later in October. And then for any of our Microsoft customers that might be listening or associated, we'll probably be at Envision, which is end of September.
Cool.
In Florida, Orlando, Florida. So we'll be doing a presentation around artificial intelligence and how, with the bot that I talked about, and how that's driving, some of the content and experiences. That's
great. And Leigh's not here, but you can find her podcast at UX Cake. I'm not speaking at anything coming up, but I wrote a little article called How to Be a UX Design Thought Leader Without Being a Complete A-Hole. You can find that on LinkedIn as well. Thanks for your time today, everybody. We'll have a recording. We'll post this, and you can share it with your friends. Thanks for joining us. Talk to you soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Pleasure.
Cool.